we know that in the midst of the chaos and collapse, there are people doing good things and soldiering on. That's still true today. When we had this conversation about this possibility, that is exactly what we hoped for, that we would capture that dogged insistence on doing good in the face of what might feel intransigent obstacles.
In terms of leadership, I mean, thinking a lot about it this year, I just think of the words humanity and courage, because I think of the leaders that have inspired me and that I see now in all realms, not just in higher education, are people who really have the courage to speak to principles and call out, like we say in our manifesto, naming and analyzing the problems, clearly naming them, not being afraid to do that. It was a lot of the work that Laura and I have done in open education and in the book was with respect for and honoring humanity as the focus.
Hello from the podcast studio, and it's September 11th, 2025. Recording another episode of OEGlobal Voices. This is the podcast we produce right here at Open Education Global, like right here in my house. Each episode, we share with you conversation style, people, practices, and ideas from open educators around the world. I'm your fortunate host, editor, and button clicker, Alan Levine, and my fortune is because today is an opportunity to catch up with two very special colleagues who last time we talked was at a dinner April 2024 in Kinsale, Ireland, at the OER 24 conference. The magnificent rainbow. Do you remember that rainbow?
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
So Laura Czerniewicz and Catherine Cronin, that was supposed to be a comma there where I say your names. You can see how well I do with the script. But besides catching up, the reason I wanted to do this is to have a conversation with Laura about winning a 2024 Open Education Award for Excellence in Leadership. And then at the same time, Laura and Catherine were recognized for the Collaboration Award that same year that was given to all the authors, artists, editors, reviewers from Higher Education for Good, which I feel like I don't have to explain what it is, because if you don't know about it, like you've been under a rock. But where did the time go? Like the awards were 11 months ago that the 2024 awards were announced. The timing works well because right now, as we speak, the review committee is coming through this year's nominations to see who's going to win the 2025 awards. And maybe we can talk about this. The idea of the awards is always focused on the winners, and I'm trying to make it about everybody who is recognized. So we're going to try to celebrate there. So again, I'm talking way too much. Let's open up the microphone for I know it's going to be an engaging conversation. So hello, Laura and Catherine. How are you today?
I am so happy to, first of all, be in the virtual room with two of my friends, Alan and Laura, and sitting in my home office space in Galway in the west of Ireland. It is a wild, wet, windy day. So I'm just looking out at that. The seasons are definitely changing from summer to autumn here. But yeah, looking forward to the chat.
And here I am in Cape Town, where the seasons are changing, and it is also a wild, wet, but sunny day.
Fantastic. You followed my lead for my introduction, because I always like to have people describe where they are, especially, again, because it's a podcast. And I really like it when you can sort of have that picture of where people are sitting.
In the green room before the podcast started, Alan mentioned kind of the early online days, which is kind of how we all met. But do you remember when there was a real phase? You used to be good at it, Alan, of the view from, out your window or the view of your screen or whatever. That was really nice, just giving people a sense of where you were.
The view out of my window right now is a whole bunch of succulents with some sunbirds. I mean, there's no point turning the camera because we're on a podcast, but it's pretty beautiful and green, and you might be able to hear the birds if you're lucky.
Oh, that's really good. And you might see a dog pop its head up. And in my latest edition, I have a cat who likes to walk on the screen during my video things. But anyhow, I want to get started. Tell us each, where on the globe did you live as a child? And I like to ask, what did you think of school and what kind of student were you? And at the OER 24 conference, I loved in your keynote how you did the introduction where you had the photos of you at different stages in your life, along the timeline of the global levels of carbon dioxide as the background. As a wee little one, Catherine, and I know the answer, but where did you grow up, and what those early years in school, what did you think of that?
That's a great question. I grew up in the Bronx and, apartment building, very urban setting. My father was a firefighter in, the FDNY in New York. And my parents were immigrants, all from Ireland. We didn't have a lot growing up. We didn't go on summer holidays and that kind of thing. But a huge focus in the family was on education. So I have one sister and one brother. For all of the three of us, all of the resources of the family were really focused on, education. That was the thing that was important. So I kind of really imbibed that, and I enjoyed school. I loved school. Myself and my two siblings are the first in our family to go to university. We grew up, I had a lovely kind of full circle moment last year because I grew up just across the street from what was called Lehman College, which is now part of CUNY. And I spoke there last year. Literally, you could throw a stone to the building that I grew up in. I left when I was 14. We moved out of the city. Stacey Katz invited me. And it was amazing because, my father used to take us for walks with our family dog, on the green grass of Lehman College. That was kind of our play space. And just never imagining that, I would go back and be speaking about open education and equity and, all of the wonderful things that we all do for work in that same space. So I think it was about the same time as you grew up was it Baltimore, Alan? So It was a really, like similar to now, it was a time of great political unrest, political assassinations, and politics was bread and butter in our family. We talked about it at the kitchen table. We talked about it with teachers in school. So I grew up really, aware and talking about, all those kinds of issues.
Did you go back to the building? Did you look at the front of it?
I have gone back to the building last year with my sister and her daughter and my son. We walked up to the apartment, just to kind of get that embodied experience. Yeah. So yeah, amazing. I mean, there's all kinds of families still living there, a lot of immigrants still.
It just reminds me, I'm already going off on tangents, of that website, Dear Photograph, where you take like a print photo of like a place you grew up and you superimpose it to try to line it up. Then you write a post that's sort of like a message to what's in that scene. And it's just always, to me, it was like, what a fabulous like storytelling assignment.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for that.
Laura, where did Laura spend her life as a child? And what was your first years of school like?
I just thought that it would be such a generative question. I've been working with Catherine all this time, and I've just heard things I've never heard before. So I grew up in Cape Town. My parents were immigrants from Europe post Second World War. My father had left school after primary school, and my mother spent most of high school in hiding. So formal education wasn't part of their background, and they were absolutely committed to education. So there wasn't any money except for a book. And it's really interesting what you were saying about politics, because what happened to me was that as I went through schooling, my formal education fell away more and more, and my political education grew increasingly. So I was a star student in primary school, and then less of a star student in high school. And then when I got to university in Cape Town, it was 1976 when everything just blew up in South Africa. The formal part of the education was really secondary compared to the politics of the day. Even though I grew up in South Africa, it was very much with a global sensibility, I suppose, given that my father died by then, given my mother's connection with Europe and what had been going on there, which I suppose has stayed with me to this day.
Both your stories, like, there's no surprise in it. It says a lot. I just was thinking, like, when you think about how rich and actually in some ways not small, but like so contained the world was. Because I used to ask my mother, because she grew up in the Depression, what it was like. And she says, I didn't realize what was going on. I was playing with my sisters and my friends. That's so different where now we're just blasted everywhere by what's going on in the world.
Even now, you don't realize what's distinctive about the period you grew up in. I didn't realize that the politics of the time was so distinctive until much later, obviously, because that was what was normal.
And at the same time, I was in town on an errand. I saw this family crossing the street, and this girl, like maybe 7 or 8 or 9, she was skipping with joy, skipping, and it's like that still happens. That's reassuring.
Yeah, lovely.
So we'll talk about some of the award things. Laura, you got a leadership award, a lot for the work that you did at the University of Cape Town. How do you see the things that you were really involved with looking back now, and where's the university at with some of those initiatives?
I can answer the first part, but not the second, because I am a professor emeritus now, which means that I'm not actually directly in that role anymore in the same way that I used to be. But I think it was simpler. It's funny, my kids say to me now that anti-apartheid days were easier, which of course I go, what do you mean? What they mean is there was a clear enemy. You could be comrades with all sorts of people against that clear enemy. And now the enemy is much less clear. And so with open education and open access, I think it was clearer then. You know, there was an opportunity when the internet kind of became mainstream, and all of those original sayings about, you know, here's an opportunity for sharing. Now, sharing doesn't mean more cost, it means no cost. Breaking open the proprietary systems was much clearer. I think the argument to be made was much clearer. I'm not saying it was easy, but I think someone starting out in education now would have a more tricky time around what is open, what's the agenda. I think all along the way, I had a pretty clear agenda. It was obviously linked to a kind of values-based approach that was familiar to many people in South Africa, especially people who'd come out of anti-apartheid struggle and so on. Social justice agendas here are familiar. They're not as mainstream as they should be, but they are known. So open education was tied up with all of those kinds of ways of seeing the world. And now it's much more difficult. I've got to the point now that I'm nervous to speak about being an open advocate. You almost have to go in with subtitles. I mean this, and I don't mean that. And sorry, I'm going off at a bit of a tangent. I mean, I'm ranting and let Catherine must speak, but do you want CC BY? Do you want fully open? Who's going to appropriate your knowledge if you go fully open? Is it a little bit more careful? You know, when you're being an advocate, you need to have a much clearer message. Now, I think the message is it's complicated. That doesn't make for easy messaging.
Yeah. Like openness means like, I'm going to like take all your content and repackage it and sell it and not give you credit.
And it depends who you are and what you're going to do with it. How about AI and which means that organizations like Creative Commons are in quite a tricky situation in terms of what they are stating. So I'm not saying I had an easy time of it over my career, but I do think it was clearer what the end goal was. I suppose the end goal is still clear, but how we get there is much more difficult now.
Leadership is a word, like we know what it means and we have our understandings of it, but like both of you, because you're both been leaders in many ways, like and like as those kids growing up in those environments, I don't know if you aspired to say like, when I grow up, I want to be a leader. And so what is leadership? What's some of the more nuanced and important elements of it these days? In the work you do, people tend to think, oh, those are the people who run the organizations and they make all the things work. But leadership, especially what you both have demonstrated in the last couple of years, is so many different things.
I guess I'll speak first because I want to piggyback on what Laura was just saying. When I first kind of got into and became aware of open education, my background was originally engineering, and then I did a degree in women's studies. So I did a lot of community education and studied critical pedagogy and feminist pedagogy and so on. So when I saw what was happening in the open space, and I found the work that Laura and Cheryl Hodgkinson Williams and others were doing in those years, and was really attracted to that more so than a lot of the work that was, coming out of the US, which was very focused on OER and open licensing. Just that social justice focus and personal focus was what attracted me and really inspired me, and learned a lot from Laura and Cheryl and so many others. And then, tried to ground that in the work I was doing in Ireland. They were leaders, and inspirations for me, when I first got involved in open education. In terms of leadership, thinking a lot about it this year, I just think of the words humanity and courage, because I think of the leaders that have inspired me and that I see now in all realms, not just in higher education, are people who really have the courage to speak to principles and call out, like we say, we'll talk about higher education for good in a few minutes, but like we say in our manifesto, naming and analyzing the problems, clearly naming them, not being afraid to do that, and focusing on the human. And I know we'll talk about AI as well, but again, it was a lot of the work that Laura and I have done in open education and in the book was with respect for and honoring humanity as the focus. And this sounds simple, but you don't see it everywhere. It's increasingly obfuscated and, not mainstream. And for me, it's very sad. I think that we need more courageous leadership that respects humanity, that holds hope, that can paint a vision so people can see the difference from where we are now to what might be, what could be, more humane and socially just futures, and then help and encourage people to step towards that. So don't know how I got there, but that's kind of my raw thoughts about leadership today.
Some of the things that you're saying, Catherine, pertain to this moment.
Mm-hmm.
Because at this moment, there was an old saying back in the day about speaking truth to power. It requires a particular kind of courage now.
Yeah.
Even more than before.
Yeah.
But the one thing that hasn't changed about leadership, I think, is listening. And that's always been true. I think people associate leadership with decisiveness, and maybe it's maybe it's a kind of male version of authority and so on, whereas actually to have the confidence to listen and hear and be wrong, that's a very particular kind of confidence. It's harder than ever now, actually.
Mm-hmm.
I have to say that Zoran Mamdani at the moment is being pretty good at going out and listening to people and shifting his responses. I don't see that kind of single stance, fixed ideas approach to leadership as being a sign of leadership. I think that kind of inflexibility is a real problem. That's not leadership.
Yeah.
Ability to be flexible and take responsibility. I don't think that one is escaping from that.
Mm-hmm.
But actually listening and taking into account what is being said is a really difficult thing. It always has been, and it certainly is at the moment.
Yeah, I agree with that, Laura. And you're just reminding me when I'm listening to you speaking, it sounds like part of what you're talking about is humility, the humility of saying, I could be wrong and I'm willing to change your view and so on. And I remember years ago, I used to talk about that in speaking with people in early days about open education, because oftentimes when people would first encounter someone who's openly sharing, or what might be called an open scholar, it could be viewed as hubristic. Well, you're just out there putting your stuff everywhere. People would say those things. I always viewed it as the opposite. And I think a lot of open scholars do that. It's actually humility, saying, I'm going to put this out there. It's kind of just what I do. It might not be perfect, but, that's the cape that you wear as an open, practitioner. It's just the opposite of what it might appear to be. And that's, as you say, Laura, that's leadership as well.
We're looking for like these superhero leaders who are going to fix things, and we look for that politically. We look through it, in the work that we do, and the characteristics that you're describing are the things that it says it's human, etc. The humanity of it. We had a great conversation about a year ago with Maren Deepwell and Amanda Coolidge from BC campus, who recently stepped down into a new adventure. And it's really interesting to watch their transitions from organizational leadership to doing the kind of leadership that I see both of you, as being practitioners and outspoken critics and positivists about, what open education can mean. So I'm just celebrating both of you again.
Well, thank you. And Maren and Amanda are just two, amazing examples of kind of what we're talking about.
Let's talk about higher education for good. And I'm not going to ask you to tell the whole story again, but I want to focus on how the collaboration came into that book. Did you envision that from the beginning? What was the hope for the way it would work when you put the call out?
The innovative version. Funnily enough, we did envisage it the way it turned out. That sounds kind of strange and rare, except it was even better than we imagined. There was this, could we make this happen? But of course, you can only make things happen that are nascent and ready to happen. So it was also capturing what I think people felt and needed. Both Catherine and I had stepped down from formal roles where we had been in positions of leadership. I can't speak in general. We were both pretty exhausted, and the world was a real mess. And it's still a real mess, but we were at that moment where you say to yourself, oh my God, is anything I did of any use? It just looks so dire. And neither of us are those kinds of people, because we know that in the midst of the chaos and collapse, there are people doing good things and soldiering on. That's still true today. When we had this conversation about this possibility, that is exactly what we hoped for, that we would capture that dogged insistence on doing good in the face of what might feel intransigent obstacles. And it happened. It's amazing and astonishing and bigger than we ever, but it's a real celebration of the fact that in the midst of everything, and something we have to all remind ourselves now when we watch what's going on in the world, that there are good actions and people no matter what.
Yeah. And the human, again, Laura and I collaborated initially. Like, we knew each other through open education work over the years from like 2011 or 2012 or something out online, I guess, and then involved in a few projects together. We co-chaired OER 19 in Galway. And we all have these relationships in our lives that, you work with someone and it just clicks. Someone says, what if, and the other person finishes the sentence. Someone says, let's, and the other person knows what you're thinking. We had that experience and we thought, well, we'll definitely have to do something again together. As Laura said, we kind of emerged from organizational positions at about the same time, staggering and exhausted, but angry and fierce, and just kind of saying, it doesn't have to be like this. And we knew lots of other people who felt like that as well, and knew that there must be many more. We didn't want to just rely on our friends. So that collaboration that you ask about, Alan, it started out with two of us. We spoke for about 6 months together every couple of weeks until we put out the call for papers. And we just asked, what about, could we, we realized that we weren't encumbered by a journal's rules. This was going to be an open access book. We weren't encumbered by our institutional constraints. So yeah, it could have poetry. Yeah, it could have artwork. Yeah, we could partner with people. Yes, we could look for early career scholars and offer them mentoring, and just everything we thought of. We just thought, yeah, let's do that. Let's kind of remedy lots of the pain points that we had experienced ourselves. So it was really healing as much as anything for us. And we know from feedback from the authors that, most of them appeared to believe it was a good experience also. We really wanted it to be, it wasn't really by accident.
And the moment when it was like, okay, it's going to the publishers, we're done. Did it feel like you were done, or were you thinking about, oh, we should have done this, Or did we leave this out? Or, oh my God, do I have to worry about typos? Like, what was that feeling like when you finally said that, like, I think this is it?
You called me that night and you were going for a swim.
I'm always about to go for a swim.
You were always about to go for a swim. And remember, both of us just said, we really miss each other right now. Like it would have been great if we could have physically been together then.
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely. So there's two things I want to say. The first thing is that we have fantastic publishers. It was so important to have publishers who shared our values and principles. And we found these open book publishers don't require article processing, book processing charges. They make decisions on the basis of the quality. They cross-subsidize. Their whole publishing model is designed to further the principles of openness, which is fantastic. It's been great to see other books follow in our paths since then as well. Then the other thing is that the book was always only ever part of the journey. So yes, getting the book into the product was one thing, but it's had a life of its own.
Yeah.
What's been such fun is to see how the authors of different chapters have been popping up on panels together. People we know didn't know each other before. There's been ongoing projects, and that's just so happy making. The collaboration has lived on.
It was expanded and the challenge put out there in your keynote. And I want to talk a little bit about where we are in terms of those crossroads. But first of all, I understand there was sort of like this movement to sort of like make some regional activity hubs, because I know that Catherine and I, we've been talking with Heather Ross, for something in Canada, North America. How is that approach working where you're trying to distribute out carrying on this work?
In a sense, our job as co-editors finished when the book was published. We intentionally, as I said, created a community and tried to support that community and everything. And as Laura said, all kinds of different collaborations have happened since then, different kinds of things, like, as you mentioned, like a regional hub, just different collaborations going on to write together, friendships, across author groups. A number of people have asked us, what about a sequel? But, both of us feel, and Laura, you can follow on after me and to say it clearer if you want, but it's not our work about what comes after that. Like, this was our contribution to the pool of, knowledge, and things are moving very quickly now. Part of a role of a leader is to step aside and make space for, the next people that want to pick up that and combine it with their experience and other collaborators and so on. And that's would be, I think, a much more generative way for the work to go forward. So we don't have any ownership or intention about needing to be involved about anything at this point.
And the interesting thing was that the book went to the publishers, and then the next month, ChatGPT hit higher education. It's like that. And I remember having this conversation with the author of the one chapter, which is about AI, and saying, well, you can't possibly rewrite this chapter. And luckily, the chapter was really about principles. We looked at it again, and those principles stand.
Yeah.
But if there were to be a sequel, it would be so embedded in AI and in the way that AI is embedded in higher education today. It would be different.
Embedded or intruded, to use a geologic reference. But and I'll let you know, there was another nomination this year for another collection of stories of hope. And it's like, oh, someone did the sequel. I knew not to ask, and I wouldn't expect a sequel. Your keynote in Cork was just so like unkeynote-like in terms of the excitement and the idea about what do we do now? And that was like a year and a half ago. And oh my God, it feels like 10 years ago. So if the crossroads were here, where are we now in terms of being at the crossroads for open education?
Go ahead, Laura. Yeah.
Well, I hate to say this because I'm an optimist, but in many ways, I think things are so much worse. We've got Trump, we've got Musk, we've got big tech has just intruded not just into higher education, but into everything.
Mm-hmm.
And some of the gains have been rolled back. The way that big tech has infiltrated, some of it's been exposed. It was already happening before, but some of it has just been settled to the point of extracting would be really, really difficult. From that point of view, things we were warning of have happened in that way you wish they hadn't. And that's really scary.
So the book was published in October of 2023. That keynote was, as you said, spring of 2024. So, we were still in the flow, and, it was a lot about the book, but we wanted to stretch it and make it more than just about the book. We intentionally didn't want to present a list of, suggestions. It was presented as questions. These are the big questions that we think are being faced by the open movement and higher education at this moment. That really spawned a lot of conversation at the time. And then 6 months later was the Open Ed conference, which was about a year ago. We did a workshop at that and then invited people to address some of the questions. We had a big Google Doc and so on. And we went away and clustered that. And that's where, as you said, Alan, this kind of idea of regional hub came up. That was a lot of North American participants with some brilliant ideas. And a few people involved in that said, yeah, I want to be involved in taking some of these forward. So that's going off in that direction. And then Helen Beetham published a book review, which was much bigger than book review. It was like a follow-on conversation talking about democracy and authoritarianism and so on in relation to higher education for good. And then Laura and I partnered with Helen and did a keynote at Otessa this year about addressing the challenges to open education in an era of authoritarianism and big tech. Like Laura said, the conversation is just evolving, and we still are happy to be a part of it, but involving other people, bringing it different places, and listening to what other people are saying as well. But authoritarian and big tech are they're the rocks in the road, aren't they? These are the big challenges.
And knowing that same feeling of oh my God, the state of the world right now. And at the same time, when I have chances for this scale of conversation or organizational work is, you're trying to work with many people. But when you get individual, messages back or from people you've never met before, to me, that always sends a spark of that little bit of optimism. When you have a short, but meaningful, connection. Heather started a thing, because, and this happens a lot, we're so busy and we're doing many things. Where are the times when you just get together, like at a conference, and you meet up and just have that unstructured conversation? And so that's kind of where we're at right now, but we're on a monthly schedule now. It's so reassuring to be in a group of, sometimes it's 8, sometimes it's 15 people who can just relax for a moment and then really just be human with each other, instead of trying to change the world and, do everything. Yeah. So I'm wondering if you find that in your work too, because we talked some, Catherine, about, I see people kind of retreating from being the public personas, to taking care of themselves or, enjoying their gardening or their family, all such healthy attitudes to have.
Yeah. This year has been a different year for me. Some years, a lot of things happen in your life. So, illness and bereavement and, a lot of support needed across my family. So work was busy in the spring semester and I decided to take some time off in the summer. And that was good. In that space, some opportunities came up in the community, in the beautiful community of Kinvara that I live in, that wouldn't have happened if I was working at the pace that I was working at before and if I was, online as much. So, for example, on Inauguration Day, I had put up a post on Instagram. We all talk about, we make these compromises about the tools that we use. I've never used Facebook, but I did start using Instagram, and then it was bought by Facebook/Meta. I didn't use it for a while, but I'm connected with a lot of nieces and nephews all over the world, including Antarctica, for their posts on Instagram. So I just put up a post on January 20th after seeing all those guys sitting in the front row saying, I'm really, tortured about what I'm going to do about staying here or not. Maybe you are too. And if you want to have a conversation, or here's a list of some references, like Maria Ressa. Laura wrote a series of blog posts about using WhatsApp. I put a few resources for people. I think like a lot of us working in critical approaches to tech, personal and professional, have collided a lot this year. Everyone in our life is now dealing with, oh my goodness, I'm using these things and they're taking my data and so on. I've gotten involved with a couple of groups in Kinvara. One involves artists and parents and teachers and therapists about, creative avenues of activity for children, young people, but also for adults. Not about no phones, but just about addressing this issue of big tech in our lives and alternative ways of being creative. We're using Signal so I can bring some of my, skills, background, and knowledge in a really gentle way and in a really collaborative way. We're all equals, and I'm learning so much. And my goodness, working with artists is so wonderful. It's just amazing. So I've really been kind of like feet on the ground, doing a lot of face-to-face stuff in the last couple of months. That's combining a lot of parts of my life. That feels good. But still reading and responding and collaborating with people in this field that we all work in, but a little less time doing that and more time locally. What about you, Laura?
So I talk about what I'm not doing. I'm still doing bits and pieces. I think I'll probably always do bits and pieces. It's very difficult to be in this field because it's all around us all the time. From that point of view, I suppose I'm doing both formal and informal mentoring, which is great. But the wonderful thing about not being in a formal role is the liberation of mental space that I have found. All that time that you spend on proposals, institutional and regional and network politics, and is intellectual space being taken up. I am reading at the moment, like I don't think I've read since I was a teenager. I am reading so widely on so many things. I've just ordered 3 books. One is on Palestine, one is on India, and one is on Mars. And they're all really interesting in different ways. I can now see how they all interconnect. You might ask, what have Palestine, India, and Mars have got to do? But they actually do, It's this wonderful place and space to have the headspace to read in that kind of way. So it's ironically a fantastic moment for me personally to be able to do all of that sense making, not being caught up with all that other stuff, which is all important and necessary and part of the journey, but you don't have time to reflect.
Yeah.
You're in meetings all day and then you spend the evenings doing emails. I still see that. I still see people sending me emails on the projects that I am doing. They're sending me emails at 11 or at 3 or whatever. And I'm on a podcast listening to something really interesting while I'm probably making something at the same time.
I'm still like with the Palestine, India, Mars connection. I'm looking forward, and I know there is one. You've talked about some of this, but like one of my favorite questions to ask people is like, what really brings you joy and hope away from the work? And I know some of the answers ahead of time, but I think it's really good to hear you share. I'll go back to you, Laura, because I think I know what it is, but you may have a surprise answer for me.
You mean other than swimming?
You can talk about swimming.
Well, that was one of the bizarre silver linings of COVID. I moved right near the seaside. I swim pretty much every day, winter or summer, and it's just life-changing. And when you're in the ocean, it's really hard to think about anything else.
How cold is the water right now?
At the moment, it's about 13 degrees.
Yeah.
Not too bad.
Is the water there, do you have a lot of waves?
It varies. I mean, it depends. I'm not a surfer, but every day it's different. So it's endlessly interesting. You never get tired of the ocean.
And what about you, Catherine?
Yeah, I go swimming in the sea, but not as religiously as Laura does. But I really relate to that when I do swim in the sea. It really gets you back into your body. I used to love that feeling because you just have to be, especially when it's cold. I am working less, and as Laura said, making space in my life for, being with family in different ways that I haven't been able to be, spending more time with family that are in different places, reading, just getting healthy again. I mean, there's a real toll that the way that higher education has us working takes on a body for different people that plays out in different ways. But, I don't feel utterly exhausted. I feel healthier and happier, just to have that little bit more space, and also reading more poetry as well. So Higher Education for Good was just so great for that. We dug into that. I'm taking a short 5-week poetry class at the moment. The first is just the other night. Just discovering, all different kinds of poetry. So
I could talk for hours to both of you. This is so enjoyable. Thank you again. And I want to let people know that we're getting to the part where there are close to 200 nominations this year for the awards. We have our committee, which are former award winners who help go through them. And we come down with our short list, which will be announced at the end of September. But a lot of the shift has been away from the winners to everybody. So I'm getting ready to post a list of everyone who was nominated. I don't just get to see who they were, but I have sort of the information that was in their nomination. And this sort of theme this year, it's the gardening thing. I'm stuck on gardening. About nominating someone is like planting a seed. You watch it grow, you cultivate it. And we're hoping that's what happens in terms of all the people that we're trying to recognize. So that's the plan. And then mid-October, we're just getting together, October 13th to 15th, I think it is. We're doing this OE Global Snapshots of Open Education Around the World. We're going to do a day on Europe and Africa and try to get just those pictures about what's going on. And then another day on Asia and yeah, North America gets in there somewhere. The closing to that is going to be the last day. And the award winners are going to have a chance to be part of all those things, doing some lightning talks or sharing their work. And not just the winners, the nominees. Then the last day will be the announcements of the winners, which is always very exciting. So I hope you have your eyes out for that. But there's another thing that I've been trying to do. I've been thinking about this idea about doing small bits of recognition. You know what it means when out of the blue, someone just says thank you for doing that, or this meant so much to me. I've been doing this thing with one of Brian Mather's remix, and it came up in the podcast I had with him. We call it the hat tip. I'm trying to get people to do one of these. And there's some problems with the hats because honestly, they're a little bit male and whatnot, but it doesn't matter. It's just go in there, take 5 minutes, think of someone who did something for you, and just maybe send it to them, not publicly, but privately, just to say thank you. And I'm trying to encourage that because the idea is if Catherine sends me a hat tip, I'm oh my God, this feels so good. I want to do it to someone else.
Alan, that is beautiful. I love that. And, we're just going to come full circle to kind of what we talked about at the start about leadership, humanity and everything. And for me, and I think for lots and lots of people, you just embody that so wholly. You're always about the human in open. And you've always modeled that since I first knew you. That's probably at least 15 years ago since we encountered each other on Twitter, and you're still doing it. And so, thanks to you and to OE Global, as we've said about a lot of things today, it's more important than ever. So yay for all of the things that you just mentioned. And if you need help, you know who to reach out to.
You know what I also really like about these awards and the way you're framing them is they don't feel performative. There's so much of the social media kind of life now. There's a real danger, even open stuff, of it becoming performative. Hanging on to that sincerity and watching people doing it right. So important.
Oh, well, thank you. And thank you for folks who are going to be listening to this when it gets published. This episode of OEGlobal Voices, the podcast from Open Education Global. And I do something wrong with this. I don't have theme music that I use on every show. Every show I pick a different musical track that I find in the Free Music Archive. And the fun part is trying to find a track that has some connection to what we're talking about. So actually today it was easy when I searched for Hope. There were like pages and pages of results for open license music about Hope. But the one I picked was by an artist named Xenial with an X, shared under Creative Commons Attribution License. And I think you'll like the song, Catherine and Laura, and you'll have to wait till I edit to see what the song is. But the genre that's listed on this track is uplifting gospel instrumental. So see, that's almost like Palestine, India, and Mars.
And Mars. Mars.
You'll find this episode at our site, voices.global.org. And we try to get conversations going in our OEG Connect space or wherever you find us in social media, or just send out to all your friends on Signal and other platforms. And so I'm always really interested to hear suggestions for other people we should have on our show. And my heart is warm on this morning, just uplifted my whole day by having this conversation.
Likewise.
Thank you.
Thanks, Alan.